I can't imagine anyone having questions, but comments or thoughts or Star Wars fan stories.
You know, so something that comes up in discussions with a person who is more of a fan of the Sith than the Jedi is that those baser natures end up being a necessary part of humanity, and you start getting into, you know, that sort of Nietzschean Apollo versus Dionysus. There's got to be a balance between them. But you know, it sort of it ties into what we're going to be talking about next, because there's this notion that you have to let those things out sometimes, or that they're going to end up ruling you and destroying you.
Right.
Do you think that there's a way to incorporate that notion into, you know, this Platonic search for reason, or not?
Yeah.
I mean, is it consistent at all with that mission?
Yeah, I think that's the goal of contemporary philosophy, right? You had the origins of the rational tradition found Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and there was a strong alignment to the lighter side of man's emotional experience. But again, that lighter side is described in, you know, as the rational side, right? Certainly not the emotive, definitely not the passionate or bodily, right? So this is a tradition that began with Plato, a philosopher who notoriously hated the body. The body was a prison, right? And it went on to influence the most dominating morality in Western culture, which is the Christian morality, right? Which has gone on to influence every social institution of which you are a part. So the strength of that belief system is, you know, the force is strong with it, and and by force I mean simply its presence in our everyday moral experience, even in the movies that we're entertained by, right? You can see the tradition, that rationalist tradition bleeding through Star Wars stories, Marvel Universe certainly, and there are no questions, ifs, ands, or buts as to whether it bleeds through the Lord of the Rings. The intentions of Tolkien were rather clear. But you do have 19th century German rebellion, right? The Nietzschean rebellion there, the call to discard of the structures that are taking us away from the actualization of our true self, the bodily self, the self that's capable of embracing the dark and using it creatively, even if destruction becomes a means of creation, right? That destruction could be the destruction of standards, the destruction of religion, destruction of harmful belief. And I think what happens now in contemporary philosophy is we do want to amalgamate the ancient tradition with that existential and with that existential interpretation of the human psyche, because there are merits to Nietzsche's position. There are certain things that he touches on with respect to our experience of ourselves and our experience of ourselves in reality that are undeniable. And that is something the Sith captures. That's why the Sith is sympathetic in the Star Wars storyline. But you've all seen Star Wars, right? Except one person. I wanted to keep it as general as possible for those who hadn't. But the Sith represent a morality that opposes the philosophy of the Jedi, who were dogmatic and institutionalized and extraordinarily rational and a bit religious, right? Certainly. And the Sith are a sympathetic group of people, absolutely. Even though they commit these atrocities, they philosophically they hold, I think, what you're referring to, that 19th century German philosophy that ignites our curiosity into our psyche without the limits of normative morality.
Right. And if the Jedi represent order, then in a way the Sith represent freedom from order, and in that way they represent freedom. So there's, you know, it's
right.
really easy for it to be sympathetic.
Right. The reality is, just like whenever you're dealing with conflicting moralities, right? Jedi, Sith, and every other real set of conflicting moralities you encounter, the disagreement exists in the path, but not the goal, right? I'd say they're, especially from the rationalist tradition, the claim is that, philosophically speaking, so speaking more about the history of philosophy, less about particular Jedi philosophical persons, the goal of rationalist philosophy is freedom through ordered movements, right? Through an ordered agency, okay? It's through acting virtuously. It's through behaving normatively in this way that your freedom is actualized, right? And the opposite position would be freedom despite order, because, and it's evidential, it's negative, and not negative in a bad way. It's negative in a philosophically reactionary way. Insofar as, for example, Nietzsche said, it's clear over the, by investigating the history of social life that these structures have prevented man from being free. Thus, that was never the path. It's the opposite one we must take. And then I think I'm gonna call it after that. Go ahead.
So George Lucas obviously felt the need to sort of go in a reductionist sort of way when he wanted to explain what the Force is and explain that it's midichlorians and things like that, and people didn't really like that. But in our world, obviously, looking at what we were fundamentally made out of, which is sort of what you were hinting at the end there, it gives us great insight at who we are and where we come from. I think there's some danger in going too far with that, and that you get to a level where it doesn't tell you what it all means. Like even, if you go down to the quantum mechanical level, like the physicists haven't agreed what quantum mechanics even means. So there is a little bit of danger of reductionism, and we live in a world of these emergent structures that maybe don't have all of the quality, or have new qualities embodied upon it that maybe the fundamental reality doesn't necessarily have on its own. Sometimes emergent structures sort of come out of things at different scales, and Star Wars sort of tried to go reductionist and everyone hated it, and everyone liked it better when it was just a nice story. I don't really know what my point is there, but I thought it was...
No. I think, that's the great thing about philosophical discussion, right? Is points. We'll get to those. It's. I think that I think that there is something appealing about mystery, right? So when we do try to explain something bare bones or try to reduce it, you're referring to the midichlorian?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay. So when we try to reduce something into some sort of physical explanation, there might be two reactions. Number one, it's just not as fun, right? And we like to have fun, whether that's in our fantasy stories or our real life. People are often preferring the mysterious explanation for things because it's far more entertaining.
But what about Occam's razor then?
Well, that's what I'm saying. However, I'm sorry. What?
I'm sorry for interrupting.
No. What I'm saying is that people very much prefer the mysterious way of things, right? William of Occam would claim that that's a less rational position to take, but people are known to disregard reason in their sets of preferences, right? However, when critical thinking, it is best to apply Occam's razor. I'd say, generally speaking, when you hear a noise in the attic, it's probably a bat, less likely a ghost. Occam's razor, right? With respect, however, to larger philosophical questions, Occam's razor is less easily applied because there are not even clear, precise answers, right? But we like that, philosophically speaking. That's fun. It's much more fun. You look at me and say, a set of midichlorians allows you to be force sensitive. Well, that removes the possibility of me believing that the force chose me, right? But again, I think the greater purpose for the Star Wars discussion is to understand it analogously. Again, what's so appealing about these kinds of stories? It's that it is a way in which we as adults can actualize our philosophical curiosities, the things that we feel silly about wondering about, right? What's the point of sitting around and wondering what the meaning of life is? Why should I care what's going to happen after I die? I have to work and pay taxes. And you do have to work and pay taxes. Don't ever say I told you not to work and pay taxes. That's not what I'm saying. But there's great value in philosophical wondering and questioning. Anytime we're given a chance, even if it's through a movie, to engage this sort of thing, we do. We sit in theaters, we sit in shows, and we feel compelled. I don't know, we feel overwhelmed. We feel intimately connected to these fantasies. And I think that is us being intimately connected to our own philosophical identities, and we shouldn't ignore it. We should use that as even a guide to engage in our own pursuit of understanding and pursuit of meaning. Yeah. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close. All right. Thank you.
Just a couple minutes, and then